Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, and welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. Great to be with you again. I hope you and yours are well. Lots been happening this week, lots and lots of interesting stuff, and we're going to go through it. But can I just start with saying we will not have Lloyd with us tonight. He's unfortunately today had a bereavement in the family, and we send our deepest sympathies to Lloyd and his wife and the family at their loss, and we look forward to seeing him back again soon. But not to worry, we've still got the stalwarts and of course a mystery man or woman. Which is it? We shall soon find out. So let's start with our favourite lawyer up there in Clackmannanshire, Uriva.
Hi Roddy, I'm really sorry that Lloyd isn't here, and for the reasons that you've explained, our hearts go out to him and to his family and loved ones. I've had a nice week this week though, and I would like to show you, if I may, this lovely present that I got. It's a yes, and it's painted by a woman. I'll not name her, but she knows who she is, and it's a really lovely gesture. It's about how hope is everything. Butterflies signify hope, reincarnation, and the tender aspirations of something incredibly precious. The women, the men, and the children of Scotland deserve these aspirations, thoughts, and hope. So hope over fear every time. And thanks again to the woman who put all the effort into this, and to the man who was kind enough to deliver it to me on her behalf. Thank you.
Here, here. And of course, we've got in the old Coatbridge Cavalier who's having his last few days in the US of A before he returns home to God's country. And don't say the UK this time. Look, my friend will be in trouble again.
Yeah, going back home, so can't wait. It'll be good. I'll miss it. It's been great here. It's been a wonderful year. And, you know, the much maligned,
I know, I've seen the picture.
The American government, but the people are wonderful. The people of the Midwest are a credit. They really are. They're very, very, very good, very kind, very warm, and good-natured people. Again, led by donkeys, just like the rest of us.
Yes, I know. He's very friendly, very friendly. Anyway, I just want to say, before we bring in our mystery guest, someone who's been making the news this week, let me just say, we've still got our pen here that we're trying to give someone that can find wee Petey. Where is wee Petey Morell? We want
Sneaky
to know.
Pete.
We need a photographic evidence. It's been weeks now, folks. Come on, you're not. Yep, that's the man. We're looking for him. Now find him, send us a photograph, get yourself a pen. I might even throw in a mug, because it's been quite a while. Anyway, let's, without further ado, bring in our special guest today. And it's none other than, and I hope you all were reading the article this week in the papers, is John Brown of the Independence Forum of Scotland. John,
hi,
welcome to Through a Scottish Prism. Nice to have you with us.
Thank you, Roddy. I'm in distinguished company. I refer to myself as just a gadgy Felice.
Did someone come in that I don't know about?
So I hope I can contribute positively to
I'm
this.
sure you are. I'm sure everyone who's watching this show all read the article, but just to get this new forum, I'm going to read it straight from your website, John, to make sure I don't get it wrong. But it's something I love, which is by providing an opportunity to inform, motivate, and encourage cooperation across the Scottish independence movement, we aim to develop a shared vision for a future of Scotland as an independent nation by enabling pro-independence people to work together on a non-party political basis. Fantastic. It's a thing after my own heart, John. Have you had a good response to the article in the newspapers?
Yes, I've been otherwise engaged today, and I haven't checked the mailbox or below the line comments on the article. What I've seen is very positive. I mean, that's an ambition that you've read out. I mean, and it's flagged up as a tentative step, and it's only one step in getting everybody to work together. The next step is setting up a national convention, because there's been a lot of talk in political parties and elsewhere about setting up a convention, and there's never been an understanding or an agreement on what kind of a convention we need and want. So that's where the Independence Forum got people together on the 10th of February, about 50 of us. I was quite scared at that in-person meeting because we had people from all over Scotland, from different parties and no parties, sitting at tables. And I'm thinking, no, is it going to come to fisticuffs? But no, the amount of consensus that appeared during the day on 3 themes was really inspirational. And I think we can do it, but we need more people. Currently, the Independence Forum is based on member organisations. The National Convention needs to be individual membership representing areas and regions of Scotland. And the people need to set the agenda, and the aim, as the Independence Forum planners agreed on the 10th of February, is that we're there not to campaign for independence, we're there to campaign and develop a vision, as you've said, but also to get people fired up and tuned into subjects so that they can tell the politicians what we want, so that the politicians are under no misapprehension as to what people's view of an independent Scotland is going to be. But the convention will need to focus on self-determination, because there's a lot of people who are not committed at this point in time for a variety of reasons to independence, and they need to come on board. So there are things that we can do in a convention to demonstrate that the people of Scotland can make decisions now that will put in place the building blocks for a future Scotland.
All laudable things, John. Absolutely laudable, and I certainly you have my backing for everything you've mentioned. Yep. It's something that we on here, Eva, have mentioned a great deal, is unity. We want to see a constitutional convention, a bringing together of people to get a vision of Scotland and to take that vision to the people of Scotland.
But you see, Roddy, I have a view, and I think my colleagues in the Independence Forum have the same view, is that a constitutional convention is the next stage after a national convention. A constitutional convention, to me, is where you're setting down in black and white a legal document that needs to be enacted by politicians. And the document needs to be shaped and formed by the people, and the legislature puts in place, after a referendum, that constitution. So that comes after the people in a national convention have identified all the things they want. Some of them need to have a constitution in place. Some of them could actually be enacted now, or changes could be done now. So it's a staged process. Mm-hmm. I would think that the national convention that we're planning, if we start it up proper in the autumn of this year, it could run for at least 18 months, if not more, and at some point be subsumed or overtaken by what is a constitutional convention, which is a different phase of our route to self-determination.
Yeah, I think it's admirable, and there's more and more people, Eva. I mean, this is the first step, Eva, and this is the first step towards what we want to see, this the Constitutional Convention. But last night, there was a great example this week. I mean, I've seen it in my social media feed and comments I'm getting and whatnot, and things on my website, where people are losing faith in the political parties. And last night in Rochdale, that manifested itself in one heck of a result. Techie, can you stick up the result from Rochdale? There we go, the Workers' Party of George Galloway, 39.7. But the most important thing, again, for me, is this independent picking up 21%. And the main parties are nowhere to be seen. Now, it's one by-election, it's just one result, and there'll be local factors in place. But it seems to be more and more of a trend, Eva.
Well, let me say that I am not famous for being a fan of George Galloway for innumerable reasons. But leaving that to one side, this may indeed be a significant development. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, and that may be the single step. What we certainly know in Scotland, and we're hearing this on the doors and at public meetings, is that voter apathy is a massive difficulty. And the obvious problem for us within this movement is the sheer disappointment, and I think at times disgust, that people feel with the SNP in Westminster and the SNP Green government in Holyrood, because neither of them in the main have set out to do what it says on the tin. And I think that there is real hope that John's organisation, John's endeavours, the endeavours of people around him, the voices of the people, including those voiced by organisations such as Salvo. I was at one of their Freeports meetings last weekend, which was extremely well attended, where people were expressing very serious concerns about the impact of Freeports and about the secrecy surrounding the whole Freeports agenda, because it will affect substantial swathes of our country. It will cause innumerable problems, as you've held prisms on this before, Roddy. There's issues to do with planning. There's scares about fracking. There's troubles surrounding compulsory purchase being a serious option that might be exercised. Poor wages, poor terms and conditions for workers employed within Freeports, and probably tax scams and potential illegal drug dealing arising within Freeport areas. However, this is all happening very much below the radar, and it's to the credit of the people in the Salvo Freeports organisation that they're doing what they can to roll on these events, roll them out across the country and bring these issues to the attention of the people at large. And I think that what we need to get to is a position where, instead of the people fearing the politicians, the boot is on the other foot, and the politicians fear the people when they do not do what they promised to do. So I think the SNP particularly need to step up to the mark as regards the independence question. The people will not be fooled again. At the moment, they're talking in terms of voting for them comprising another step on the way to independence, but they're not drawing a route map. I don't know if that's because it's some wonderful secret to be revealed after the general election and their defeat, or if they just haven't drawn it yet. But they've had numerous pieces of advice from people within and out with their party and within the wider movement. So I'm hoping that Scotland will learn a lesson from Rochdale, and that in the areas where, for example, ALBA and ISP are not standing candidates, that there will be candidates who will be able to stand and challenge those SNP candidates who it is felt are not actually laser focused on independence, if I put it like that. And I also believe very firmly that John's plan for a convention, a constitutional convention or a citizens' convention or whatever it may be, is something that really has to be implemented with all due urgency. What we cannot have is a position whereby the SNP suggest, as they have, that they'll create a convention after the general election. We need that done yesterday. And it's only a lack of political will that is holding us back. And if the politicians won't create a convention, then obviously the people must. And that should put the wind right up every single one of those SNP general election candidates. They had a chance last week when they walked out of the House of Commons into the lobby trying to vote aye for their motion relative to Gaza. But as I said before, they should have kept on walking and got the train north and got to Edinburgh and sat and created the Constitutional Convention then. Well, there's a recess coming up. They've got time to do that within the next month or two, and I strongly suggest that Humza Yousaf's next move is to lift the phone to you, John, and start talking.
Well, the fact is, I put out a tweet today saying to the SNP, I wouldn't get excited about Labour getting a kicking down in Rochdale, because this is going to be repeated in Scotland. The thing is, Phil, I accept that there's local conditions, always is in by-elections, but it's usually the government party that takes the kicking. But this was a Labour seat, the opposition that took a kicking. And as I say, another independent took the second place. It really is hopefully a message to our politicians that it's time you stop listening to the lobbyists, your donors, and you start listening to the people either side of the border.
Yeah, you'd like to think so. And this was unique. Obviously, George Galloway made this about Gaza. And given the demographic in Rochdale, that would resonate with some parts of that demographic more than others. And George has got a reputation for standing up for the underdog. And like Eva, I'm not a fan of his stance on independence, but I admired him immensely when he stood up in the US Senate, where he was formidable. He gained my respect when he did that. But this is him back in Parliament with a resounding win in Rochdale after a campaign where the Gaza war was a running theme all the way through it. He stood on that platform and and they said, Keir Starmer, his message, Keir Starmer, this is for Gaza. And that's what he said after polling over 12,000 votes, nearly 6,000 more than any other candidate. Yeah, I hope you're right, Roddy. I hope it is people waking up. You'd like to think so, because by God, there's been enough obvious messages, and we've been shouting this from the rooftops for a long time. It is long overdue that politicians started doing what the people want, and SNP have turned their back on us, completely turned their back on us. And our party, that once proud and great party that was the SNP, its discipline, its focus, its laser-like focus, as Eva said earlier, was on independence, nothing less. And that's gone, and it's lamentable, and they need a bloodied nose to show them that they're facing the wrong direction. But I've no faith in the current leadership to do that, because they're in the pockets of those that would keep us on our knees, and they're in it for themselves. So if you want to back the people, I would suggest you get out of politics. Those in the, and I use that term very loosely, leadership of the SNP, get out of politics, and if you want to be genuine, stand on a campaign for devolution, because that seems to be what you're after, and allow the SNP to return to its focus. But no, the Workers' Party of Britain, I mean, he's been there a few times, and hopefully initiatives like John's initiative and the Independence Forum Scotland. I love anything that's inclusive and seeks to further the cause, and especially being of all parties and none, and focused on unity. So yeah, I love the first steps. When I looked at your website, John, again from your own website, I love the tab. You go the About tab and the first steps to commission, and I quote again as Roddy did, to commission experts to develop a new prospectus for an independent Scotland that identifies key issues and a vision based on the opportunities afforded by a future Scotland, with the full powers of a sovereign nation. These are the words that ring true. These are the words that resonate with people like us who have a passion and who understand that the people, and it will work for almost all of us. And even those, I would urge those who are successful, charity is a coat you wear twice a year, is nothing to be proud of, and that's a George Michael lyric, would you believe? But it will be better for all the people of Scotland. We will thrive and prosper as a nation, as a people, and our successful people will continue to win that success that they currently enjoy under the UK. But it'll be better. It'll be better for everybody, and you can have a clear conscience, because you won't have to resort to charity to look after your own.
Yep. Well, I would like to see, hopefully, a lot of independence for independence, standing maybe at the general election and beyond. But John, the first thing that came out, and I was saying, will they listen? Well, the Labour Party's immediately come out and said, no, they're not changing their view on Gaza. They will just, they're just going to keep going, even when the voters give them such a slap in the face. All, and not just the Labour Party, but all the political parties have such disdain for the voters, don't they?
Roddy, that kind of arrogance takes some shifting, to be honest. It's ingrained and inbuilt. They're defending their position. As you say, they're not listening. If they were listening, they wouldn't need to spend £30 million on protecting MPs or politicians, because the politicians would be liked. If there was consensus politics, nay confrontation, then the people would be engaged with them in the street, safely, and in their constituency offices. So, yes, there's a lesson to learn from Rochdale, but the cynic in me says that it will take more than one daffodil to make a spring, and that's a daffodil. I wouldn't refer to Gallagher as a daffodil, right enough. No my type of flower. But I think if he stands up in the House of Commons and doesn't move on the Gaza issue, then that will have an effect. But being Scottish, quite frankly, one person in Westminster, even on something like Gaza, he's not going to make a hell of a lot of a difference in the time that's needed to stop the slaughter of the innocents.
The other thing is that Starmer and Sunak have joined hands, Eva, on this mob rule. In other words, anyone who demonstrates against Israel and sticks up for Palestine. Techie, can you stick up the ITV clip, the ITN news clip outside Downing Street where they're talking about the mob rule?
Startling thing to hear from a Prime Minister, and I think those words have been chosen deliberately to shock and to make headlines, and they have. But actually, the sentiment behind them, the general feeling, is something that we've been hearing more and more over the last few weeks as MPs have been coming under increasing pressure to back calls for a ceasefire in the Middle East. So earlier this month, there was an attack on the home of Conservative MP Tobias Ellwood, which Rishi Sunak described as an aggressive mob. Then there was the chaos in the House of Commons last week during a debate about a ceasefire when concerns about MPs being threatened or intimidated actually affected the way that those votes were run. And since October the 7th, there have been protests taking place across the country, largely peaceful, but which have been costing millions of pounds to police, and including demonstrations outside MPs' constituency offices. And so the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary met police chiefs here at Downing Street yesterday, and that is where the Prime Minister said this: there is a growing consensus that mob rule is replacing democratic rule, and we've got to collectively, all of us, change that urgently. We simply cannot allow this pattern of increasingly violent and intimidatory behaviour, which is, as far as anyone can see, intended to shut down free debate and stop elected representatives doing their job.
I find that almost hysterical, Eva. Virtually, it goes back to, remember, cybernats and the establishment were saying, oh, it was nearly civil war during the referendum in 2014, which we all know it wasn't. It was the happiest, happy, clappy time of all times. And they're making out all this mob rule. There's been no violence. There's been no trouble whatsoever. And to say, oh yeah, and it's costing millions as well. They're doing everything to shut down anyone having an opinion that's opposite from the warmongers.
Yeah, what's difficult about this actually is that Rishi Sunak refers to mob rule and he refers to democratic rule. But what we've seen in the last few years is that we've been ruled by spivs and warmongers and thieves and charlatans who have, particularly over the pandemic, rewarded those around them with shady, seedy contracts worth millions and in some cases billions to the detriment of the economy of the United Kingdom. So it ill behoves Rishi Sunak or Keir Starmer to start a rant about the need for the restoration of democracy and peaceable protest when it is they who have ignored the will of the population for years on end, and more recently have ignored the will of the vast majority of the population of the United Kingdom who want to see an immediate ceasefire in the Middle East and sensible, sensitive talks about how peace can begin to be restored and how those people who have suffered and who continue to suffer can have their suffering relieved. It's the politicians who've got a job to do here, and the public are making it plain what the job is that they want to see done. Instead, the politicians continue to cozy up to the Americans and apparently also to Israel to the detriment of the stability of the Middle East. Politicians should be afraid of what the people will do at the ballot box at the next election, as opposed to referring to mob rule as an excuse to try to bring more and more right-wing, bordering on fascist policies to bear in the context of the rule of law and our rights to freedom of expression, etc.
It is the establishment full hate when the proletariat dare to question anything they're doing. And then, and this is all part of a softening up process, and so paving the way for them to come in with some rather draconian laws that will stop any kind of protest, any kind of democracy that they pretend to protect.
Yes, it's absolutely. This is very, very disconcerting. We should be very concerned about it, really worried, because we've become like the American system where there is very little difference between the two parties wrestling for power. The perception that they had a choice or have a choice is kind of still there in Britain, because we still have Labour, which used to be left, Lib Dem centric, and of course the Tories on the right. But now the Liberals are no longer a viable option, and all the other parties have become too similar. Even Labour are now so right wing. It's back to Tony Blair, who was the last Prime Minister I voted for when I backed Tom Clark in the past. But this mob rule replacing democratic rule, it is laughable, Roddy, because it's the shysters, as Eve has pointed out, the rulers, and we don't see true democratic rule. We don't see in the news the farmers of Europe, the actions, the yellow vests in France. That's true democracy. The people speak and act when ignored by their elected representatives. And banning mob rule, they say, silenced the voice of the people. Look at what the Scottish Government did. Moved to ban democratic protests, the expression of the people, in an area outside the Scottish Parliament designed for that very purpose. This is not just the mainstream parties of Britain. This is our people, our government, the people that we elected, that we voted in SNP to represent us, and our people, the people of Scotland, want independence, as all the polls are showing, and they're not acting on our behalf. And now they're joining this scheme to silence the people, to further the nest. And the only way we can do anything here is to stand up against it, and we must not allow them to make it illegal to express our democratic right to protest and to speak up and stand up for what's right.
When I think, the introduction I had of you, John, where you've been collegiate, you want to include everyone, people of the left, people of the right, people of the SNP, of the Alba, everywhere. You, as an ordinary citizen, are saying this is the way forward. And yet here we have the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition getting together to say we don't want any kind of collegiate agreement. We want our will, and we want anyone who opposes our will to just shut up and go away.
I would like to think it's just purely political rhetoric, but it's chilling. And there is no way that people peacefully marching through the streets, making a point, is a mob rule.
No.
I mean, Phil said it's our democratic right. In Scotland, it's our constitutional right. Yeah, the right to protest is part of Scotland's constitution. The constitution that the English and many Scots don't actually know about. It's contained in Article 39 of the Claim of Right. That is the right and privilege of the subjects to protest for remit of law to the King and Parliament. Right? So the sooner we get self-determination independence, we'll have unfettered right to protest, not by mob, by any means, walking in the street. I don't think the people in the Westminster bubble know what mob rule actually is. It's a figment of their imagination, quite frankly. I mean, we haven't seen a lot of direct action, and I think it's going to take that to make a difference. I'm not a supporter of direct action, but it has its place. I saw a program on the TNT show this week where an organisation called This Is Rigged, where two youngsters, well, I say youngsters, I can get away with saying that, I'm quite old, Ailey and Owen, were really passionate about direct action. That's the organisation who had a group of people sat down in Holyrood Palace and in the dining room and had lunch, right? And they're campaigning to force, and it's not mob rule, it's small direct action. They're campaigning to have supermarkets reduce the price of child milk formula, which is increased in price by 25% over the price in 2022. I mean, it's just appalling. And the CEOs of Nestle and Danone, who produce these baby formulas, Nestle CEO earns 9 million a year. That is disgusting. It really is. And they can't afford to maintain the price of a basic essential. So yeah, I can't see mob rule being in a reality in the UK. Certainly not in Scotland. Peaceful protest is our constitutional right, and it can't be infringed upon.
I've been scanning through here to try and find it. It was a quote from John F. Kennedy. I can't get it exactly, but it was along the lines of, if you stop peaceful protests, you end up with violent unrest.
Yep.
And that's what our politicians need to remember. But I couldn't find it. It's as fate would have it. Eva, one thing I know it's close to your heart is what's happening at the moment in Grangemouth, our oil refinery, and I know Phil's also got a special interest in this too, is in danger for want of £80 million upgrade, which we can't get. No one seems interested, except the Alba Party, I've got to say, who have done anything about it. But today, or this week, it was announced that Sir Jim Ratcliffe of Enos and Manchester United has been offered a €700 million, £600 million guarantee. Can you stick it up, Techie, please, from the British government to build a petrochem plant in Antwerp, bringing jobs, no doubt, to Antwerp and out throughout Belgium. Well, the people of Scotland are going to lose their one and only refinery. The government can't find 80 million for us, but they can find 600 million to do something in Antwerp.
Nothing surprises me now. The quote that you were looking for was, "Those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable." JFK on the 13th of March 1962, when I think you were maybe about 4 years old and I was a twinkle in my father's eye. But
I was actually a bit older, but never mind.
Yep. Yeah, it seems that Jim Radcliffe's got everything going for him just now, hasn't he? He can do what he wants with impunity at Grangemouth. He's obviously right in the middle in the thick of things in the Freeport there, as we mentioned earlier, and he's getting guarantees to develop the economy of foreign countries that we used to be in a European Union with, all at risk to the British taxpayer. You couldn't make this up. If you'd have said in 2014, at the independence referendum, or a couple of years later at the time of the Brexit referendum, that this is what was going to happen, you'd have been, people would have just laughed at you. But this is what we've got to. We've got a Scottish investment bank that it doesn't do what it says on the tin. We've got, goodness knows, how many SNP MPs at Westminster who are signally failing to raise the Grangemouth issue. We've heard that Grangemouth refinery was spoken about being closed a year ago, and that the Scottish government knew that at that time, and they did absolutely bugger all to try to save it. This is the calibre of politicians that we've got. No wonder the general public are either apathetic about voting or downright bloody angry at what we see happening here. We've had all these scandals in the past about missing money and about politicians, to begin with mainly Tories, who behaved in a fashion, it was don't do as I do, do as I say. So they were able to avoid tax, invest their money in Panama and elsewhere, benefit from those regimes, whilst the rest of us at home were to suffer from austerity or tax hikes or benefit cuts or issues surrounding pensions being the smallest in Western Europe, this sort of stuff. Well, this bankrolling Jim Radcliffe for some, enterprise beyond these shores really says it all. It's not good enough. It can't go on like this. We have to have a position where politicians are accountable. And at the moment, they're signally not accountable. What you've seen in the course of the current Parliament alone is justification for increasing the powers of the people to demand recall of politicians who don't do the job that they're elected to do. So far, we've only seen a handful, and obviously particularly the dreadful spectacle of what happened around Margaret Ferrier and Rutherglen and the way that her former colleagues all jumped on that, to their own detriment too, of course. However, where we get to is if we're living in a democracy, then politicians should carry out the policies that they promised in their manifesto. If they don't do that, we, the public, should be in a position to remove them from office. That's what needs to happen forthwith. And when Scotland is independent, I sincerely hope that there is a mechanism to that effect in the Scottish Parliament, because there are too many gravy slurpers in Westminster and too many who are inept and incapable of doing a proper job in Holyrood.
Well, I think you'll have to get down to John's forum, his convention, and make that, he writes that in, that's going into the Scottish Constitution, that we have a recall, a proper recall. Phil, now you and I differ vastly on green technology and global warming, etc. However, this plant in Antwerp, it is quite a rub in the face for Scotland and for Grangemouth that he's getting money guaranteed for that, but they can't find the money to do something about keeping our refinery open.
Yeah, it's absurd. I mean, it's at times like this you can thank Ian Blackford. We're so glad we weren't pulled out of the EU against our will. Oh, wait a minute. No, Ian, come on. I mean, it's ridiculous. We're not even in the EU anymore, and we're funding private investment abroad instead of looking after our own. And actually, Roddy, we're not as far apart as you might think. I want to spend money on energy smartly. And not on cons and not on scams and not on quick bucks for private corporations. Profit's not a dirty word. It really isn't.
I agree in
Western
that.
civilization. So we're actually a lot closer than perhaps you would think, but we'll talk about that another day. But yeah, this is the UK giving 600 million backing to Jim Ratcliffe's carbon bomb. It's a petrochemical plant, and I mean, INEOS, the project in Antwerp, is going to completely change the face of plastic production in Europe. Now, we do need plastics, and we should do it sensibly. And oil and gas is for much more than just fuel. It's and becoming more so as we change into other alternative, especially hydrogen, which I would back 100%. I hope we do more on that one. But the UK government said 700 million euros for the billionaire Jim Ratcliffe to build the biggest petrochemical plant in Europe. So this has been it beggars belief. This is something like 350 million metric tons of plastic waste is produced a year, right? And by 2060, plastic waste is set to increase by 1 billion metric tons. So Antwerp is a key production centre for plastic in Europe and has created pollution from plastic pellets and emissions that as you know, the arguments go that the supercharged global heating, global warming, as some campaigners say. But despite admitting the adverse impact on climate, biodiversity, the environment and the risk to social and human health, the British government's going ahead with backing this investment in a foreign country. Now, Ratcliffe has been lobbying politicians in Europe and Britain to push back against green policies, which he claims is driving away investment. He has a point in that we need to get smarter about what policies we follow and what we don't. And if we want to reduce carbon emissions, we need to follow up on our earlier commitments. As you know, I'm in full support of the continuation of using fossil fuels responsibly and to use revenue from this to fund research and development that will help improve life for people on this planet while not polluting unnecessarily and minimising that so the planet is also not damaged or harmed. So yes to less plastic in the oceans, reduce noxious gas emissions and research renewable, sustainable and clean energy for the benefit of all. And on Grangemouth, I've worked at a few refineries and there's actually, I'm speaking about going back and doing a wee bit of work for somebody at the moment back, and I would build a new refinery for Scotland. That's what we need, a modern, efficient and profitable refinery. Grangemouth is far from the best, and it will take many more times than £80 million to fix that and change it. It's a bit of a band-aid, to be honest. When you look at, compare it to places like Phillips 66 down in the north of England on the Humber estuary, there are better things we should be doing, and building a new refinery next to or in place of Grangemouth would be the smart move, I would say.
Yeah.
There are many reasons, John, why there's a Scottish independence, a Welsh independence, and a reunification movement in Northern Ireland. And it's all for the simple reason that this is the sort of thing, if they were doing what I'm about to suggest, if the British government said, yes, sure, Sir Jim, we'll fund that 600 million we'll guarantee it, but here's what we want you to do. We want you to build that new refinery in Scotland. Get into your back pocket and put some money down, and we'll match it and build a refinery, because we need a refinery. There would be no Scottish independence movement. There would be, people would be saying, our government works for us, because that's what they're doing. But even if the British government had said, we want you to do something here, not just in Scotland, even in England, but they didn't. They just went, here's the money, on you go. Because there's money to be made, John.
Exactly. I mean, I call it corruption. No evidence that it is corruption, but it's an elitist club. There's a money to be made, and that's the trouble with our politicians. They don't think on the return for the citizen, for the ordinary Joe public. It's the return that party will get from, fueling the aspirations and the greed of industrialists or corporate bodies. I agree with Phil. We need to make use of, oil sensibly and gradually save the planet. You can't do it immediately, but we need a political system of governance that is controlled and doesn't let the chancers and the elitists to make money on the back of Joe public. I mean, I pick up on Eva's point. Yes, we should have increased powers to get rid of bad politicians, and remove them. But I think fundamentally, we need a totally different form of democracy. This is a personal view, not necessarily Independence Forum view. But what we need is a democracy which is more direct. In other words, I can't stand just having a vote once every 5 years. People should be able to take the initiative and say, hold on a minute, that piece of legislation is bad, or it's not constitutional. And if you have enough people, not on the street, signing a petition and presenting it to the Parliament and the government, and they have to act on it by law or come up with the solution that is the same as what the people say. A lot of politicians are good. Never thought I'd hear myself saying that, but okay, Phil, you're a former politician. But I think it's a system that allows them to be corrupted. And I think if we change the system, and my concern is the vast majority of people out there who are independent supporters are comfortable with change, but I don't think they realise how radical it needs to be in terms of governance, right? I have a dream that we actually have a constitution for each regional or local council, and that they have autonomy, right? Like a mini state within a state. I mean, people in Orkney and Shetland, for example, could run their affairs, have tax raising powers, and legislate locally, but you still need the checks and balances to stop the potential corruption that politics brings with it.
Yeah, it is. It's corrupt north of the border, south of the border, everywhere.
Yep.
It's just quite nauseating. Other things on the news today was this week, Eva, we've spoken about it on here a few times, is Fergus Ewing. That name Ewing with the Scottish independence movement is a name that's revered. I've made my position on Winnie Ewing well known to everyone, my great heroine of the movement. But her son was suspended by the SNP. We talked online, and actually in private we all spoke. They wouldn't be that stupid. Turns out we were wrong. They are that stupid. They've suspended him. And I love his quote, if my constituents had wanted a doormat, they'd have gone to B&Q. Wonderful quote, Fergus.
That was a most memorable quote from a man who's done more for the benefit of Scotland and for the cause of independence than probably every single one of those who voted for him to continue to be suspended. It is utterly ridiculous that we've got to this set of circumstances. Fergus' crime was to vote in favour of the no confidence motion relative to Lorna Slater. And history proves that he was right. Lorna Slater is overpaid and underqualified for the job that she's got. She ought not to be a minister. The Greens ought not to be in the government. That they are is testament to the weakness of both Nicola Sturgeon and Humza Yousaf. They do not have the political skills, the acumen, the vision, the ideas to run a barely minority government in the fashion that Alex Salmond did between 2007 and 2011. But the green tail continues to wag the yellow dog, and that will be why Fergus Ewing's suspension was confirmed, because this was his appeal against that process. So he's suspended for a week from the party that he and his mother and his sister and his late wife and so many of his friends and colleagues created. What a slap in the face. And, you know, I can only hope for Fergus Ewing's sake and for the sake of Scotland that somehow one day the SNP can be taken over again by people who have the same values and principles that Fergus Ewing has lived by for his whole life. Those in the leadership currently are clearly devoid of those values, and that's a very, very sad reflection on the state of Scottish politics today.
Yeah, it's the whips they're choosy, Phil, because we're going to come on to the next one in a minute. The whips have turned on Fergus Ewing. The time has gone on. They could have just let this slide. Why now, when their numbers are falling, as we're seeing with every opinion poll? Would they be stupid enough to do this now?
Control, power. They so desperately need to control and stay on to power, and the dissenting voices in the SNP are growing. I've still got friends there, and they're very, very unhappy the way things are going. Well, our own Lloyd, of course, is one of them. But there's people who have significant influence who are extremely unhappy about the turn the SNP have taken and the betrayal that the leadership has put into practice. And I mean, I loved that doormat quote from Fergus, but sadly, this basic requirement that you would expect from all politicians makes him unique in the Scottish Parliament. That's the tragedy here. He's doing what's right, but representing them. Well, he's not alone in that. You've got Angus Brendan McNeill and a handful of others that are also following the principles, but they're down at Westminster. But for the vast majority, they're lining their own nests, and that's the tragedy. So this obviously he's lost his appeal, Fergus, against the week-long suspension. And this was taken, disciplinary action was taken in September, as you remember, as Eva pointed out, who repeatedly criticised the party leadership. I mean, you should be able to do that. You should be able to. If you were robust enough, you could take criticism and you could argue and make peace with those who disagree, as we did, Roddy, on the situation NATO. With joining NATO.
Yeah.
We respected our positions, didn't agree with it, and now I'm back in your camp because of what's happened to NATO since then. So no, if you've got a robust government who actually represent the people and is democratic, you don't get this authoritarian party position that Fergus quite rightly has branded the SNP as currently falling under. And of course, what's significant, this was last year when this happened, and I think it was 48 votes to 9 defeat with 4 abstentions, and of course He's been suspended for that, for standing up on a no confidence motion for Lorna Slater, as Eva pointed out, which is 100% correct. She's proven to be incompetent. And again, First Minister Humza Yousaf was absent for the vote, as was Nicola Sturgeon, who had a prior arrangement like that wasn't arranged. Nonetheless, the sheep MSPs did what they were told. Cowards and shysters that they are. And again, it's the SNP leadership doing what they're told to stay in power. And if the SNP leadership, and I use that again, that term in the loosest possible way, cared about what the people of Scotland wanted, it would be making progress towards our independence. But instead, they continue with idiot policies, tying in with clowns like Lorna Slater, incompetent, and tie up with green imbeciles on madcap policies that only divide the Yes movement. So I say again and again, I should say that to those in the SNP who have abandoned the Yes movement. Show your true colours. Leave the SNP, start your own pro-devolution party instead, and then at least you would gain some merit for at least being genuine.
Here's the thing, John. It didn't do it just out of badness, Fergus. She cost us, well, I think, I might get the figures slightly wrong, but like 80 million for the bottle return scheme. The carry-on of her jumping on a private ferry, a private hired chartered boat to go to some place. I've missed out one, she's cost us the bloody money as well. He wouldn't be doing his job properly as an MSP. If he was an independent, he'd be quite doing his job properly to say, you've wasted 200 million or 150 million pounds of taxpayers' money. You're not fit for the job. If you did it in any other walk of life, if I cost my employer 100 million or 80 million, I'd be fired.
Yeah.
But not in this group.
I mean, it's a sign of a weak organisation, quite frankly, where you're trying to dictate matters of conscience. I mean, the fundamental principles of a politician, an elected person, is their conscience to certain issues and facts, and to the public that voted for them. I think it's weak, short-sighted, and shows total lack of democracy at all in the organisation. The fact that Mr. Yousaf wasn't there for the vote doesn't surprise me. And given that you mentioned his name, I would like to congratulate him on his recent news, family news, and offer a word of advice. I think he should take paternity leave and perhaps decide not to come back at the end of it.
I'll second that motion. Well said, John. You're getting an invite back here. You're definitely prison material. Talking of votes of no confidence, etc., Eva, this week, after the debacle the other week, last week, in fact, in the House of Commons, where Hoyle did what Tel Aviv told them via their agent, Sir Keir Starmer, they promised the SNP a debate under, I think, is it Section 24, Phil, or something like that. Yeah, and they reneged on it. And so the SNP, in my opinion, rightly, if they're going to be in that place, which I don't agree with, but if they are, they wanted a vote of no confidence. Now, all of the SNP MPs have signed it, except one, Mr. Blackford, who says the Speaker's a friend of his and he doesn't want to sign the vote of no confidence. I'm sorry, there are no friends in politics here, even not in my opinion anyway.
It's a dirty business. I was reminded earlier when John was talking about daffodils that it's St. David's Day today, Friday, when we're recording this. And of course, the other symbol of Welshness is the dragon. And it's good that Plaid Cymru have signed that motion or for the vote of no confidence. That Ian Blackford refuses to do so because he puts friendship before either party loyalty or, more particularly, the hearing of a motion on something as very serious as a ceasefire in the Middle East. Tells us all we need to know about Ian Blackford's loyalties and his motivations and his priorities. And it also makes us wonder whether the reports that we heard about him looking forward to taking up a seat in the House of Lords might actually have some credibility about them, because there are other aspects of Ian Blackford's life where he seems to have threatened his credibility, and certainly his integrity seems at times to have been slightly dented, if I can put it that way. So again, it's what happens to some people who go down south and they get their feet under the table. They enjoy the Westminster life. They like what happens in London. They like their taxpayer-funded expense accounts, etc. And when push comes to shove, their loyalty is to an English MP, the Speaker, the symbol of Westminster and its rule over Scotland. If there was any more evidence needed that that party has lost its way, I don't know what it would be. Because brings back, Parcela Rogues in a Nation, there's the one, the former leader who promised the sun, the moon and the stars to Scotland, and he would fight with every sinew of his being, and he would ensure that Scotland was not dragged out of Europe and that the Scottish people would have their say. But when the chips were down, Ian Blackford looked after Ian Blackford.
Yeah. When he talks of loyalty, I'm quite sure his wife was giving a wry smile when she thinks, where's your loyalty? See, it's not just women that can be bitchy, Phil. But Mr. Blackford not signing because it's his pal.
Not good enough, Ian. And I mean, this is just to reiterate that this is, I mean, Lindsay Hoyle's broken promise to allow the SNP to have a debate on Palestine after that debacle of last week. And, and the SNP move for a vote of no confidence. Is it the right course of action? Is there any point? Well, the answer for me is yes and no. Yes, under the protocols and procedures, it's correct. But no, because we continue to play their game by their rules, and we're focusing our efforts and continuing to play their games. And we're losing. We're losing. We lose ground all the time instead of prioritising the gaming of our own independence. And in truth, I don't actually care, because I think it is a waste of time signing it. But he should be standing with the party, and he should be standing up for Scotland and our right to at least be heard. At the very least, he should be standing up for it as a point of principle. But again, playing Westminster games does not advance us one bit on what should be the prime directive of removing ourselves from this failed union of unequals.
Here. John, I don't want any independence warrior bottling out of doing something because one of our enemies is his friend. And I use the term enemies openly. I don't apologise for it.
Well, I never thought there were friends in politics, to be honest, but I've never been a politician. But to be perfectly honest, I'm like Phil. I can't see the point. Hoyle needs to go. He'll be replaced. And will we see any difference in Scotland? No. We'll still have our constitutional and democratic deficit. They'll still make fools of us. They will continue to do what they like to us. And that is intolerable. So this is really just a hiccup. It should be used properly by the Westminster contingent from Scotland. But on their showing so far, they're unlikely to, and they're incapable of maximising on it. We need out of there as soon as possible.
Yep, the problem is that the only way they can succeed is if the Tories back them. And if the Tories back them, then Labour will hit them with a big stick for years to come. We're still hearing about the 1979 Callaghan collapse, but it was actually Labour MPs that did it, but the 6 SNP or the 11 SNP MPs get the blame of it. Eva, just a techie, the famous is Porridgegate. We're running out of time, but I really want to cover Porridgegate. You stick up Jenny Minto. There you go. BMI 69, that's terrible. Improving the health and supporting people to eat well, a healthy diet. They're doing away with, they want to see meal deals done away with. During a cost of living crisis, do these people not understand, Eva, the poverty and the despair that's out there, that they come out with nonsense like this during an austerity time and a cost of living crisis?
Well, you heard it here first. I'm going to have to quote George Fulks and say they've got to be doing it deliberately. This can't possibly be a mistake. Nobody's that thick, are they? because the list of banned foods is as long as your arm. These are all foods that people will still be able to buy, but they've not to be discounted at any time. But we've to not have meal deals, etc. Now, if you consider what it means to live in poverty in Scotland, it means that you often don't have a permanent home. If you've got a permanent home, you might not be able to heat it. You might not afford the gas or the electricity that is required to heat the water. I know women who get washed in cold water because they see how the meters running round and round and round too quickly when they try to heat water for a quick shower. By no stretch of the imagination are these people that I know in a position to pick and choose what they eat. They have to buy food that is cheap, porridge being one of them. Now, it is said that the list of foods that were not to be discounted was supposed to be, in essence, foods that were high in fat and sugar content, etc., and that it was pre-cooked porridge and stuff of that nature that was intended. I think that that's rubbish. I think somebody just made the list up and they didn't pay attention to what they were including in it. But the real issue in the midst of this is our politicians are completely out of touch with the reality of the lives of many thousands of Scots. There are more than 30,000 Scottish people currently homeless. None of them are going to have the luxury of taxpayer-funded meals and drinks such as our Holyrood and Westminster politicians have. It would be interesting actually to take note of the differences in the weights of and the BMI figures for all Scottish politicians since they were elected. The front bench sometimes in the opposition at Westminster tells its own tale. And you see, this is just like gender recognition reform. It's like the argument about sex, not gender. It's about hate crime. It's about all the stuff that politicians who are divorced from reality try their best to impose on the people who will suffer from the folly of those policies. Mm-hmm. You know, that unfortunately very many female politicians in Holyrood just now who are likely to be in women's aid refuges or at rape crisis where they've been counselled by men. They're not particularly likely to be in prisons where they're going to be accommodated beside men. Equally well, they're not likely to have to go to Morrison's for the yellow labels or to go to Tesco's for the Savers foods. They're not likely to be sitting there shivering in the dark, wearing coats and, you know, huddled into blankets like folk used to do 50 years ago because they can't afford to pay the gas and electricity. It really is time to get these people out of that parliament. They are doing untold damage to Scotland. They are doing untold damage to the independence movement, and they are making a fool of themselves and us every single day. Enough is enough. That power of recall can't come quickly enough.
Yeah. My favourite King's Counsel, Phil, the other Roddy, Mr. Dunlop, KC, I put out a great tweet which said, "Let them eat broccoli," which I thought was a wonderful tweet because it really is that kind of attitude, isn't it? Let them eat broccoli, the poor.
Yeah,
that wasn't Roddy, but the way he was being sarcastic. That wasn't his suggestion.
I know. This is. There's a couple of very serious points here. I mean, one, of course, she should eat healthy herself because she actually can afford it, unlike the many she's dictating to who can't. And that's the biggest point, as Eva has articulated so well. People have to live off cheap, inexpensive foods, and fresh food can be not too expensive. But when you look at what you can get, the $1.99 meal deals in Iceland that a lot of people are living off, it's not affordable for too many people in our country, and that's what she should be focusing on. I mean, there's also some of the stuff isn't that healthy that we're eating. There was a case of a young Highlander at uni in Glasgow who was I think the last reported sufferer of scurvy because he was eating porridge out a drawer in a chest of drawers. So it's crazy. But there is another serious point here. And this was from a dietary perspective, crisps and fizzy drinks are going to be removed from meal deals or trying in Scotland as we try to tackle obesity. And obesity is a growing problem with the poor quality of food. But what we should be doing is increasing the quality of affordable food, of good foods. They should become more affordable. And I would certainly, fizzy drinks should be taxed. They're horrendous. I'm currently, as you know, still in America, and obesity is a massive problem. And the health problems it causes. And I would say that we should certainly encourage health eating. So there is a good message here, but how they're going about it is ridiculous and wrong.
I agree. Fizzy drinks, I take it you're not including lager.
No.
No. John, again, we've talked about it several times today and over the weeks and months. It's the lack of understanding by our politicians. They live in such a wee bubble that they don't know the reality. And that comes obvious in this idiocy that Jenny Minto put out.
Yeah. I'm totally out of touch. I mean, the irony is today, they tweeted out, right? I'll read it. Food prices have increased by 5% compared to last year, leading families to cut back on healthy food choices, right? Phil's point exactly. We should be doing more to give people the choice of healthy food at lower cost, right? Mm-hmm. That's the nut of the problem, but they've just not grasped it. They're totally out of touch. I mean, I could say the political class is by and large middle class, wealthy, comfortable. They do not know or understand the pressures and the needs of the ordinary person on the street who have been struggling for some considerable time. Oh, probably been struggling the same way since I was born, basically. Things haven't improved that great. But I mean, I was just appalled. I was actually raging when I read the article, and I thought it was a spoof by somebody on Twitter. So I had to go and find the actual ScotGov article and read it for myself to make sure that it wasn't a spoof. It's just totally out of touch. The sooner they're removed and you get reality. Again, it raises the point. Ministers are supposed to have civil servants and committees on public health that provide them with professional advice. Where was that professional advice, right? Or if it was there, was it ignored, right? Is that what it looks like?
Yeah, probably during their meeting they'd sent for 8 pizzas.
Yeah, well,
probably. The clock's beating us. But there's a couple of stories I wanted to cover. One of them was the fact, and on touching on what you and John said, Dave, so is the fact that for 15 years, the UK, the average person's 10 grand down than they were 15 years ago. And they're talking about, eat less or eat all this stuff. And the last one, Techie, can you stick up the picture of the HMS, the Prince of Wales, one of our aircraft carriers that doesn't get out of town? Now, they're going to sell it because they can't afford to run it and build other ships. So here's my suggestion. Caledonia McBrain, put in a bid. You could get a lot of car ferries, and the car ferry, you get a lot of cars on top of that deck, and you could be taking them to Stornoway and then maybe down to Rothsay when that huge big... I mean, you've got to start thinking out the box, politicians. But you've got to laugh at Royal Britannia. They hardly go out the English Channel, and now you're having to sell them off cheap. You should be embarrassed. Don't talk to us about ferries.
Oh, absolute hilarious, and it's ridiculous as well. But I like there was a plan. I remember when we talked about an independent Scotland and the difference between the will of the people of Scotland that we're advocating take the lead in dictating what our foreign policy and our policies are. Contrast that with Britain, the MOD planning to sell off or talking about HMS Prince of Wales as the Royal Navy's skint. I like the idea we talked about during the independence campaign about using this warship as a hospital ship, using the warship, turn it into a hospital
cataracts and things like that.
Something that an independent Scotland we would do, because we would take 10% of the resources of Britain. and I'd take one of these and we'd park it up offshore Gaza right now. That's where it would be.
Yeah.
And I worked at the Rosyth Royal Naval Dockyard, and of course, an independent Scotland we'd have to fix this broken vessel first. But I'll go here. I'll go back to Rosyth where I used to work, and we'll fix it up, and we'll turn it into a conversion, into a hospital ship, and send it around the world with our best good grace and best wishes to all of humanity, because that's what we are.
Correct. It was Jim Phillips' idea, and he wanted to call it HMS Robert Burns.
Yeah.
But the way it is, actually, you wouldn't, unless they've got a lot of cataracts in Jersey or Guernsey, it's not going to get any further than that, because the damn thing keeps breaking down. But anyway, folks, the clock has beaten us, and these people are all want to get their Sunday lunch or watch the football or whatever. So thank you for your time, John. Thanks for stepping in. You should all know, folks, John's come out of sick bed, he's had pneumonia, and he's come out to give you his wisdom and show you what a good guy is. So the Independence Forum, look it up, sign up, and support it. We need all the unity, everyone together. And it's the grassroots, ladies and gentlemen, who are going to take us to independence. I don't think the political parties have got it in them. Till I see you and you see me, you take care now.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.